Niger is a non-coastal country in West Africa named after the Niger River. 2019 statistics show that the estimated population of Niger is 23.18 million, ranking 57th in the world. Niger is the largest country in West Africa, and the 22nd largest country in the world, with over 80% of its land covered by the Sahara Desert. Niger's people are very poor, and the country consistently is ranked either last or next to last by the United Nations Human Development Index. A large percentage of the Nigerian population are known to be living in more rural and secluded areas. Despite the available natural resources, Nigeria has proven to remain one of the poorest countries in the world, with over 70% of its population living below the international poverty line. Whilst progress has been made towards education for all since 2000, it has been very uneven within the sub-Saharan Africa region. The pace of improvement towards universal primary education has been faster, with the average primary net enrollment ratio increasing from 57% to 70% between 1999 and 2005. However, some countries have fallen behind in some goals. Here are some statistics comparing the education system in both Niger and Kenya. It has been found that Kenya are 4.1% times more likely to be literate. In Niger, the literacy rate is 19.1%, and in Kenya, it is 78.0%. Niger spends 6.0% of money on education, whilst Kenya only spends 5.3%. In September 2000, leaders of 189 countries gathered and signed the historic Millennium Declaration, in which they committed to achieving a set of 8 measurable goals that range from having extreme poverty and hunger to promoting gender equality, by the target date of 2015. Substantial progress had been made regarding the goals, as the extreme poverty rate had already been halved by 2015. The original goals expired in 2015, and the discussion of a post-2015 agenda continues. The focus is now on building a sustainable world where environmental sustainability, social inclusion, and economic development are equally valued. The goals have adopted and emphasize on development as a right, with targeted attention directed towards traditionally marginalized groups such as ethnic minorities and women. A United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development roused a process to develop a new set of Sustainable Development Goals which would carry on the momentum generated by the MDGs and fit into a global development framework beyond 2015. Most known top differences include the fact the MDG targets for 2015 were set to get us halfway to the goals, such as reducing poverty in areas, whereas the SDGs want to end all the goals, including eliminating poverty for good. This includes a statistical zero on hunger, poverty, preventable child deaths and other targets. Another known difference is the focusing on quality education. The MDGs are known for their focus on qualitative education and high enrollment rates, whereas the SDGs focus on the quality of education. Niger adopted the poverty reduction strategy, which placed education at the center of the government's policies, which allowed every citizen to move towards ideals of liberty and social justice, as well as aspire to welfare and fight against poverty. The poverty reduction strategy pays special attention to the improvement of quality in education and training, as well as the quantity of schools in a successful educational system, which will contribute better to reducing poverty. In addition, the Educational Policy Plan for the 2002 to 2012 decade recommends the acceleration of universal education and literacy, the improvement of quality and relevance of the education system, including the non-professional and the professional, technical training sector, and the improvement of quality in education by reforming the curriculum. In 2015, Africa was among the regions where 3/4 of children under 5 remain malnourished, and enrollment rates in pre-primary education reached only 18% while they increased over 30% globally. A second statistic showed that fewer than 60% of primary school students enter secondary school and only 20% of students complete the education cycle. These statistics are highlighting a deep issue within Niger's education system, in that improvements are slow and children are not gaining full access to high-quality education. Niger's education system has proven to become overburdened by poverty and strong population growth. For example, in 2015 it was found that a full 44% of the country's population was below the age of 15. According to the United Nations, 8.73 million primary school-aged children in 2010 did not participate in education at all. At this time, this made Nigeria to be the country with the highest number of children out of school in the world. It has been argued that the inadequate education system in place for young children is heavily weakening the Nigerian system at its foundation. According to the Global Monitoring Report, 57 million children are still failing to learn, simply because they are not in school. Additionally, fewer than 8% of the children that did attend primary school have acquired acceptable literacy and numeracy skills according to UNICEF in 2018. It's important to consider that access to education is not the only crisis. Poor quality is holding back learning even for those who make it to school. The government has allocated a budget to education that is higher than that of other countries in the region, and progress has been made in recent years. Since 2012, the number of children enrolled in primary school has kept pace with population growth, increasing by 35%. Some of the improved areas include the fact that more than 16,000 additional classrooms have been opened and nearly 30,000 more teachers have been trained. The government has also implemented an education and training sector plan that began in 2014 and will go through 2024. However, being among the world's poorest countries, Niger is still far from the goal of universal primary education. The Education and Training Sector Plan for 2014 to 2024 reaffirms the commitment of the government to making education and training a priority. The plan outlines a series of priorities, including developing incentive programs to increase girls' enrollment and retention, implanting a school construction program to meet population pressures, and implementing a literacy and non-formal education program to reach those who have never attended school or have dropped out. It has been argued that girls' education in Niger needs serious improvement. UNICEF statistics suggest in Niger, only 1 in 2 girls goes to primary school, 1 in 10 to secondary school, and 1 in 50 to high school. The 2019 literacy rate in Niger was roughly 28.7%, and with only 15.1% of these being female. In other words, it has been found that only 15.1% of females over the age of 15 in Nigeria are able to read and write. Additionally, Niger was home to 45% of the world's out-of-school children in 2005, of whom 54% were girls. The Borgen Project has been described as a non-profit organization that is addressing poverty and hunger and working towards ending them. This organization is known for its promoting of the work being carried out by UNICEF, for example, whom are aiming to implement more female role models and make learning environments more girl-friendly. However, they have suggested while these projects do exist, their recent implementation means that apparent success will take time to develop. girls are still much less likely than boys to benefit from a secondary education. An African woman faces a 1 in 31 chance of dying from complications due to pregnancy or childbirth, compared to a 1 in 4,300 chance in the developed world. Women's voice and agency remain limited, with rates of gender-based violence reaching alarming levels. Poor access to legal rights, sexual and reproductive health services and freedom of movement pose additional constraints for women. Girls' education has improved significantly. However, girls continue to show a lag behind boys, in many areas of the world, in terms of access to education, completion of education, and acquisition of basic skills such as literacy. For example, in 2009, around 35 million girls were out of school compared to 31 million boys. This action plan is guided by the 4 strategic priorities outlined in the 2012 World Development Report. These priority areas are reducing excess female mortality, closing gaps in productivity and earnings, shrinking differences in voice in the household and society, and investing in youth to break intergenerational cycles of gender inequality. So what can be done for girls in Niger with no education? Programs from all over the world are helping countries like Niger with their education, including the Next Project and USAID. Realistic goals should be made, such as enhancing the involvement of women in decision-making and protecting people in poverty from stigmatization, for workers to be paid a sufficient wage and to ask women what they need.